Hello, Pirates Nation. Welcome into episode 2 of Pirates Weekly. Happy to be back with you, team insiders, Oliver Nissi, Leverett Ball. Leverett, we're back for the second episode of this show. And again, we're going to be talking about the IFL teams. You excited for it?
You know it. Very excited to be here, talk about some of the opponents that the Pirates are going up against. Obviously, they're moving to a new league, so it's going to be a lot of new faces. And, I think they're ready for the challenge.
Well, we're going to start out this episode by breaking down the Tucson Sugar Skulls, one of the coolest names in the league. We'll get to their team name in just a second, but I want to start out by breaking down the Tucson team. They're the third Arizona team, along with the Northern Arizona Wranglers and the Arizona Rattlers. They play in the Tucson area, which is home of the University of Arizona, a huge college football school and college basketball, very good college sports school in general. And the Sugar Skulls, Leverett, they joined the IFL in their inaugural season in 2019, and they fared very well. They went 7-7 and made the playoffs. They got kicked out in the first round to the eventual champion, Sioux Falls Storm. They only lost that first round game by 4 points, but a very impressive first season for Tucson.
Yeah, they absolutely did. For them, being a new team, they wanted to get off to a good start. They were able to make some things happen in 2019, and they have great experience, at the head coaching position with Dixie Wooten. He's a guy who has previous experience coaching in the indoor game with Iowa, had some success there and is looking to bring everything he learned about life in the IFL to his role with Tucson.
Yeah, and you mentioned Wooten. He was a two-time IFL Coach of the Year in 2017 and 2018 with the Barnstormers. The Barnstormers, they won it all, the United Bowl, in 2018. So a big prize coming over to the Sugar Skulls. Another prize is on the field, is their quarterback, arguably the biggest free agent signing coming into the 2021 season, and that is quarterback E.J. Hilliard. He was the 2019 IFL Offensive Player of the Year, and Tucson is very excited to see him on the field.
Yeah, the 2020 season didn't happen, obviously, because of the pandemic. So the last time we saw the IFL play, he was named Offensive Player of the Year, in 2019, like you said. He's one of those Quad City guys. Since they opted out of this season, the players became free agents. So he's one of the Quad City signings. Some of their top players who've now gone on to other teams. And for him, at the most important position on the field, being a former Offensive Player of the Year, he could do some big things for them. He really is a talent. He's a guy with a lot of arm strength, also some speed, so he can make it happen both in the passing game and the running game. And, he's been a star ever since his college days at FIU. That was when he first really started to gain his reputation as a top talent. And, the Pirates are going to have their hands full going up against him.
Yeah, and while he was at FIU, he was throwing to the likes of T.Y. Hilton, who is a Pro Bowl wide receiver now. He's a veteran now in the NFL. But getting back to Hilliard, we mentioned repeatedly, because it's an important thing to know, that he was the Offensive Player of the Year the last time the IFL had a season, but he very well was in the MVP running with the Barnstormers quarterback, Daquan Neal, who we talked about last week. So arguably the two best quarterbacks heading into next season is E.J. Hilliard and Daquan Neal. But Hilliard joining a new team in Tucson, and that's the big storyline coming to this season for them. Another cool thing about Tucson is their team name. I mentioned it earlier, the Sugar Skulls. It references the Day of the Dead, and every year in the Tucson area, there's a huge event. So it's called the All Souls Procession, and over 150,000 people attend it every year.
Wow. What an event. And, obviously part of the tradition there in the Tucson area. And, it's certainly an appropriate name for their franchise, and I think for them, having that name, they're really able to embrace the community in Tucson. And, I think it's a great choice of the name there. Like I said, for a franchise playing in that area, being in touch with some of the history, in Tucson. And I think that's something that the fans appreciate. And, in indoor football, because there's not quite as much TV exposure as the NFL, a lot of the support comes from local fans and, fans who live in the area that the team plays, who have that local pride and really feel a personal connection to the team. And I think the name there, like I said, the Sugar Skulls is so appropriate, and I think, like I said, their fans love it.
So Tucson, coming off their first season in 2019, they won 500 in their first season. They're going to look to amp it up in 2021. Tucson, Arizona, the land of the desert, or the Valley of the Sun, I believe is the more appropriate term. And those guys, like the Northern Arizona Wranglers and the Arizona Rattlers, who we're going to talk about next, these teams in Arizona, they're very fortunate to be living in a place where they're from, where it's basically you can work out all year round. So it might be an advantage for the Sugar Skulls heading into next season. The Pirates play the Sugar Skulls in Week 9 as the second half of the season kicks off. It's on the road, the second game in Arizona that the Pirates will play in a 3-week span. Coming up next is the Arizona Rattlers. It's a home game, the first of 2 at the DCU Center in Week 10 for the Massachusetts Pirates. Oliver Nissi, Leverett Ball, happy for you to join us on Episode 2 of Pirates Weekly. We'll be right back. After the Pirates play the Tucson Sugar Skulls, they'll be playing the Arizona Rattlers at home in Week 10. That game is at the DCU Center. And Leverett, the Rattlers, last week we talked about the Sioux Falls Storm and how they were one of the most successful teams, arguably the most successful team in the IFL. But I'd say right behind them are the Rattlers.
Yeah, and kind of like Sioux Falls, they're a team with a lot of history. And, for the Rattlers, they played for quite a while in the AFL, the Arena Football League. They actually won 5 Arena Bowls during their time in the AFL. Had a lot of success, and then in 2017, they actually moved over to the IFL and won a championship in their first season as an IFL team, winning the United Bowl. So wherever they've been, they've done plenty of winning, and they were, like I said, one of the original AFL teams back in the day when that was the main league in indoor football. So this is a franchise that has accomplished a lot over the years, and when we look at the IFL, there are so many different expansion teams and teams that have been around for a year or two, but it's teams like the Arizona Rattlers or the Sioux Falls Storm that are franchises that have been around for quite a while.
And you mentioned the Rattlers won the IFL championship, the United Bowl, in 2017, their first season in the IFL. But perhaps even more impressive, last year in 2019, the last season that the IFL had, the Rattlers almost had an undefeated season. They were 16-0 heading into the final game against the Sioux Falls Storm and lost the United Bowl by just 3 points, 56-53. So it kind of reminds me of the Patriots back in 2007 when they went up against the New York Giants and just couldn't get it done at the end. They came so close.
Yeah, just like the Patriots, fans around here in the New England area can relate to the feeling of, being undefeated heading into the championship game and then not pulling it off in the championship game. Obviously, in the Patriots' case, it was a Super Bowl at the NFL level. In their case, a United Bowl in the IFL. But that happens sometimes. I wonder maybe if, being undefeated heading into a championship game is actually bad because you go in maybe a little bit overconfident. We've had that taste of losing in your mouth. You're more prepared for it. You're more on your toes and maybe a little more motivated and fired up heading into a championship game. I don't know. I don't know if motivation was the issue there or exactly what happened, but that is a crushing end to, what was an undefeated season heading into the United Bowl to then not be able to pull it off, like you said.
Well, I think they just faced a team that is at the same pedigree for sure, and it just seems like the Sioux Falls Storm came out and had the upper hand in that game. But
was Eli Manning the quarterback for Sioux Falls that day? I don't know.
He very well might have been the quarterback.
Did he blew a pass on a guy's helmet that day? I don't know. Who knows?
His career was trending a little downwards at that point.
True.
So he may have been in the IFL. But getting back to the Rattlers, I want to talk about their coach, Kevin Guy. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy, no pun intended, who's had a lot of success coaching. You mentioned that the Rattlers played in the AFL. He holds the all-time AFL best winning percentage as a coach. He coached in the AFL from 2008 to 2016. And the most impressive stat I find with Guy is that since he's been coaching the Rattlers since 2008, he has 51 players go on to sign NFL contracts.
Wow, that's impressive. And, Coach Guy is known as a guy's guy. Dad joke. But all jokes aside, though, I mean, what a run he's had in the indoor game. And we talked about this before. Some coaches in the IFL and other indoor leagues are guys who previously coached college teams or, were assistants at the NFL level. But it's really cool when you see a guy who has all that experience specifically in the indoor game. And you mentioned also, all the players he sent on to the NFL. That's the type of guy that, you want to play for at this level, because these are mostly guys who feel as though they were overlooked by NFL teams, feel as though they belong at that level, and want to advance to the next level. So when you have a history of, producing guys who eventually go on to the NFL, that looks great on your resume. And I mean, no question. I mean, he's had a lot of success, and it's, really sounds like it's not a coincidence with, like you said, all the experiences he has in the indoor game and all the guys he's sent to the NFL.
There's a lot of guys that we're talking about.
Yes.
When you were just talking about Rattlers head coach Kevin Guy. We'll be seeing him this season at home at the DCU Center in Week 10. The Pirates will play the Rattlers then. But I want to talk about a couple of the Rattlers players before we finish up talking about this team. I want to start out with arguably their best wide receiver, Jared Harrington. In 2019, he was the IFL Most Improved Player. He had almost 700 receiving yards, 14 receiving touchdowns, and 2 kick return touchdowns. So this is a guy who can not only do some damage on the offensive side of the ball while running some routes, but he's dangerous in the special teams game as well.
Yeah, and you have to keep an eye on him at all times. He has kind of that utility player role, where he can make some plays on offense as a receiver, also a threat in the kicking game. So, you can never take your eyes off him. And I mean, with a guy like that, with some of these, skill players and fast guys, I think one way to contain them is just to be physical with them. Just hit them, impose your will on them. And that's the type of thing that can throw someone like that off his game. If you don't, hit him, if you're not physical with him, you take your eye off him. Maybe, you keep an eye on him defensively, but maybe, you don't hustle down the field on a kickoff, whatever. If you take your eye off him at any moment on offense or special teams, he could really make you pay. So the Pirates are going to have their hands full with him, and they really, really need to, like I said, game plan for him ahead of time and really keep an eye on him, when they go up against him.
The next player I want to talk about is the quarterback, Drew Powell. Powell, he's a former IFL MVP. He won the IFL MVP in 2018 as a member of the Iowa Barnstormers. They won the championship that season, and Powell had an abbreviated year last year with the Rattlers. He came over from the Barnstormers. He played in just 6 games and had 18 passing touchdowns. He helped lead them into the IFL championship game last season. So, I mean, as a coach, as a wide receiver we were just talking about, and as a team, the Rattlers, you got to feel pretty good with that quarterback leading the charge.
Yeah, I mean, Powell, he's certainly put up some, impressive statistics. And you mentioned, he's a former IFL MVP. The Pirates quarterback, Sean Brackett, won an MVP during the team's NAL days. So, that's some tough competition for Brackett, if he wants to put some MVPs on his resume in the IFL, going up against other guys at his position who have, won that award. And Powell, he's a guy who's been well-traveled. He's played for multiple indoor teams. With some of the success he's had, you wonder if maybe he could be a prospect to advance beyond the indoor game at some point. Maybe play in Canada. Maybe get, an NFL training camp look. But, a dangerous guy with the football in his hands. His passing numbers, like you said, very impressive. And, again, the Pirates are going to have to be on their A-game against him.
Yeah, I think what you were just saying about Powell, how he's definitely got a shot. He's got a shot at playing at a higher level. Not to say that the IFL is not a high level, but Powell, Harrington, a lot of the guys that we talked about last week, they all have – this is a developing, budding league. We're talking with the Arizona Rattlers here. The Pirates will play them in Week 10. Coming up next, the Pirates will take on the Frisco Fighters in the week following this one, and we'll tell you about them next. The next team in the IFL Team Showcase, the Frisco Fighters, who the Pirates play in Week 11 at home, the first games of the 2021 season of back-to-back home games at the DCU Center in Leverett. The Fighters, they've yet to play a game as a franchise, they announced their plans to join the IFL following the 2019 season. Their 2020 season did not happen. And for a team that has not played yet, there's a lot to talk about with this team.
No question. Like you said, they're an expansion team. They were supposed to have their first IFL season last season. Obviously, because of the pandemic, that was not able to happen. But what a stacked roster they already have. It all begins with Jared Hurd at quarterback. I mean, he really had a run at University of Texas. He was actually their starting quarterback as a freshman, put up some numbers, but then ended up moving to wide receiver. Played the remainder of his career, at wide receiver, and then, after getting out of college, spent some time in the XFL, now moving over to the IFL. But talk about an impressive college resume, a guy who started at the University of Texas, at quarterback as a freshman, now moving over to the IFL. And, he really is a talent. And you also see, the athleticism he has, being able to then move to the receiver position. But, now back at the quarterback position in the IFL. And, for him, if he is to advance to, the Canadian League or the NFL, it's unclear, would he continue to play quarterback or would he move back to wideout? But, at least in the IFL, like I said, he is playing quarterback.
Well, I think the answer to that question is he'd be willing to do anything, any position, kind of like a Julian Edelman. I mean,
yes.
I know we keep referencing the Patriots, but they've been around so long, they have so much success. But like Edelman, I mean, he was a quarterback coming out of college, like
Jacoby Myers.
Myers, yeah. So, but Jared Hurd, what's really cool about him is, I mean, you talked about a lot of stuff, but this is the Frisco Fighters, and it's kind of like a homecoming for him. He played college football, as you were saying, at the University of Texas, and now he gets to play quarterback again in Texas at the professional level. You're talking about you started to talk about some of their other weapons. I'll get into that right now. They have two wide receivers that they signed away from the Quad City Steamwheelers. It's a mouthful to say, but I think I said it correctly. The Quad City Steamwheelers announced in October of this year, about a month ago, that they were not going to have a 2021 season. Like some other teams, they elected to push towards 2022 to stay away from all the COVID mess. That's their decision, but they lost some key players, and two wide receivers that they lost to the Fighters, starting with Quentin Pedroza. He was third in the IFL in receptions and second in the IFL in receiving touchdowns in 2019. And then the other receiver is Kevin Rudd, who was second in the IFL in receiving yards.
Yeah, and like you said, both of them guys from Quad City. And what a unique situation, the fact that, sometimes during this pandemic we've seen an entire league shut down. But in this case, with Quad City, the franchise will not be participating in the upcoming season, but the remainder of the league, with the exception of a couple other teams that have opted out, are still going to be playing. And so this is a unique situation. Like I said, it's not an entire league canceling a season. There are certain franchises that aren't playing, and so their players become free agents. And in this case, they're able to capitalize there, bringing in some of the top wide receiver talent in the league. And that's not really something you can prepare for as an organization. You don't necessarily see those things coming, but they're able to capitalize and really, add to their arsenal of offensive weapons.
We're talking Frisco Fighters they're the next team up on the Massachusetts Pirates IFL Team Showcase, the second episode of Pirates Weekly. Oliver Nissi, Leverett Ball, Team Insiders. We're talking about the Fighters players, but I want to talk about their coach now. And the coach is more impressive, in my opinion, than the players. Nothing against the players, but head coach for the Fighters, Clint Dolezal, he is a 3-time Coach of the Year award in the Arena Football League with the Philadelphia Soul. He won 2 AFL titles with the Soul, and he's an AFL Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, what a resume. And like you said, all that experience coming in the AFL, both as a coach and a Hall of Fame player. And like I said earlier, back when the AFL was in business, they were, the number one indoor football league in the United States. Obviously, they're no longer around, and now the IFL really has a chance to push ahead of all the other indoor leagues in the country and really be known as that stable presence in the world of indoor football and the most competitive indoor league in the country. But like you mentioned, for him, playing, having a Hall of Fame career as a quarterback in the AFL, and then coaching for the Philadelphia Soul. They were a very well-known team. When they're in the AFL, they were always in contention every year. They won championships, and they had arguably the most famous owner in the history of arena football in John Bon Jovi. He was the owner and president of the team at the time, and I've said this before, no disrespect to Jawad. Jawad's a great team president, but I think John Bon Jovi is a better singer. I think if they had a singing competition between all of the people who have run indoor football leagues, John Bon Jovi would smoke everyone else in the group. Are there other professional musicians who have owned indoor football teams or run them?
I don't believe so. And even
does Mick Jagger run a team or something, or
I'm not sure.
Jason Derulo, or
that's a great question. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. John Bon Jovi, he's another guy. We keep talking about the Patriots, but you see him at Patriots games with Robert Kraft. I believe he was at one of the Patriots' most recent games this season. But yeah, Coach Clint Dolezal coming over from the AFL, joining the Fighters. The Fighters are their general manager, Stephen Evans. He helps run the IFL operations. So the Fighters are not only a team, but they also are heavily involved with the IFL operations. And to talk a little bit more about the Fighters before we wrap up and move on to the next team in the IFL Team Showcase, the Fighters are the state of Texas' only IFL team. The last time the IFL had a team in Texas was in 2014. So it's been 5 or 6 years, and Texas is a hotbed for football.
Oh, it really is, and beyond just the Dallas Cowboys and University of Texas and TCU and the other college programs in the state. I mean, high school football is also huge in Texas. A lot of those high school football programs, produce guys who go on to the highest levels of college football and go on to professional football. And a lot of those high school football programs, get television coverage. They get their games broadcast on ESPN Plus. There have been high school teams in Texas that have their own reality shows,
movies. I mean, yeah, I think movies, of Friday Night
books,
Lights.
Yeah, 100%. And some of those high school football players are local celebrities. They get recognized at the grocery store. So what a football hotbed. Even some of their junior college programs in the area are incredibly high powered and go on to send guys to the highest level. Cam Newton played junior college ball in Texas, but in between his stops at University of Florida and Auburn. So just so much football in Texas. If you're a big, strong, athletic guy and you grew up in Texas, odds are they're going to put you on a football field. And the fact that they're the only IFL team in such a high-powered football state, I mean, that's a lot of attention and exposure for them. And, in a state that's so passionate about football and also a number of other sports with some of the other, Major League Baseball, MLB, NHL teams in the state, what a sports hotbed, what a football hotbed, and there's a lot of anticipation for their first ever season as a franchise.
Yeah, and I'm glad you alluded to it at the end of what you were just saying, how it's not just football. There's other sports in this Frisco area, which is right in the heart of Dallas pretty much. I mean, you talked about the Cowboys, the Dallas Stars, the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic, an ascending star in the league. There's even lesser leagues, the MLS, the MLL, they're all there. The PGA,
Rangers as well.
The Rangers, baseball, yeah. I forgot about the Rangers, and the PGA headquarters are moving from the East Coast to Frisco itself. So the Fighters they picked a great place for the next one of the next IFL teams. They will make their debut in 2021. They've been licking their chops to get at it since late last year. Oliver Nissi, Leverett Ball on the second edition of Pirates Weekly here. Coming up next is the Green Bay Blizzard. In Week 12, the Pirates will play them, and we'll talk about them next in the IFL Team Showcase. In Week 12, the Massachusetts Pirates will take a trip to the Midwest, where it gets extremely cold in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The team is called the Blizzard. There's a bunch of those up there in the Great Lakes. And Leverett, the Blizzard are the second oldest team in the IFL. The IFL started in 2009, and the Blizzard joined the IFL in 2010.
Yeah, like you said, moving over to the IFL in 2010. Prior to that, they actually played 7 seasons in the AF2, which was the minor league second level of the AFL, kind of a developmental league for the AFL, the Arena Football League. So, like I said, 7 seasons in that league, then moved over in 2010 to the IFL. And they're actually the second oldest IFL franchise behind the Sioux Falls Storm. Like we've talked about before, there's some teams in this league that are new expansion teams. There are also some teams that, have lengthy histories as franchises, but, that history has been in the AFL or the NAL or other indoor leagues. But like I said, the Blizzard are a team that has some history in the IFL and some familiarity, and that could be somewhat of an advantage for them this coming season with so many new teams and so many teams that have played in other leagues with slightly different rules or don't necessarily have a feel for the format of the IFL. They're one of those veteran teams, and that could benefit them. They did go on a little bit of a playoff drought. After they moved over to the IFL, but maybe this could be their year to really turn things around.
Yeah, and I mean, when they originally first moved to the IFL, they were still very good. Those were like their power years. But you mentioned the playoff drought. The last 6 or 7 years, from 2012, 2013, up until 2019, their last season on the field. In 2019, they had 9 wins, the most since 2012, and their coach, Corey Roberson, was named IFL Coach of the Year in 2019. So they made the playoffs in 2019. They had a first-round exit, but quite the turnaround. And going into next season, it's a lot to build on.
Yeah, and that is a tough break for them. I mean, it's a tough break for any franchise in any sport that couldn't play in 2020 because of COVID. But for them, in 2019, they had one of the best seasons that they'd had as an IFL franchise. And they had a lot of momentum heading into 2020, so they definitely had to be disappointed when they couldn't, carry that momentum into the 2020 season, and when they found out that they weren't going to be able to play. But still, the last time we saw them, they did look pretty good. Obviously, like I said, they had that playoff drought, but they were really starting to turn the corner in 2019. And yeah, we'll see if that was just a flash in the pan or if they can continue that success this coming season.
Pirates founder, president, and general manager Jawad Yateem, he was a former IFL quarterback, and he actually played the Blizzard back in 2016 when he played in that season. But another cool thing about the Blizzard is that they're the Green Bay Blizzard. And I'm sure you can think of the other Green Bay football team, the Packers in the NFL. And, we talk a lot about the Patriots so far in the first 2 episodes of Pirates Weekly. But the reality is the Patriots, I mean, I know they're a Massachusetts-based team, a New England-based team, but they're in Foxborough, and that's a pretty far trip from here to Worcester. The Blizzard, on the other hand, they're located just 1 block away from Lambeau Field. So it's a pretty cool thing where you get all these Packer fans coming in. It helps with the team, the recognition and the branding, and maybe that's part of the reason they've stayed around this long.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. They're right down the street, like you said, from Lambeau. To this point, I have not heard any reports of Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers, making a guest appearance, playing a little quarterback for the Blizzard.
That'd be
IFL,
awesome.
their IFL opponents would be in a lot of trouble, if that were to happen.
I could totally see Brett Favre coming back after it seemed like he was never going to retire after he left the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, what did he announce his retirement, 5 different times and then continue to play?
Pretty much.
So who knows? How old is he now? Late 40s? Maybe he could come back.
He's still making those Wrangler commercials.
That is true. And he shows some good arm strength in those Wrangler commercials when he's playing football in his jeans and they're not even ripping. I mean, that's arm strength when you can fire a pass to your buddy without even ripping your jeans. You don't really have to have that torque into the throw. It's just a quick flick of the wrist. So yeah, he's still got it. To this point, like I said, I have not heard anything about him playing for the Blizzard. That is cool though that they're, like you said, so close to Lambeau, and you have to wonder if there is a little bit of a, all jokes aside, a relationship between the two teams. If maybe they don't necessarily view each other as competitors, but they try to support each other. And, obviously in the IFL, they play in the spring, so it's not at the same time as the NFL. It's an off-season league. And, maybe it's something for, people in Green Bay, when they're in the spring, when they're getting fired up, getting fired up for the upcoming Packers season. They can go watch some Blizzard games and kind of get the football juices flowing again.
Yeah, and speaking of Packers games, I've actually had the opportunity to go to Lambeau Field a couple of years ago. I went to the Packers' final regular season game. It was a season they did not make the playoffs. And Aaron Rodgers, I got to see him play, but he got injured during the game. They were playing the Detroit Lions, and their backup quarterback, I believe it was Deshaun Kaiser, he came in. They lost the game to the Lions 31-0. But it does not take away from my Lambeau experience. I made sure to get myself a cheesehead for my trophy room at home. So the Green Bay Blizzard, I mean, they're a stable franchise. They've been around a long time. I look for them to go into next season in 2021 building off their playoff appearance last season, and a player who's going to help them build off and do well next season, to start things at least, is their wide receiver, Keyshawn Taylor. He's been re-signed by the team this offseason, and Taylor finished tied for 7th most receptions in the IFL in 2019. So right off the bat, it's a nice ship to build on heading into next season.
Yeah, and another guy, it's kind of like we talked about, what a great season they had in 2019. Taylor had, great individual numbers, like you said, in 2019. That had to be disappointing for him. He would have liked to, build off of that momentum heading into 2020. But he's going to be a weapon for them, offensively. And, he's a big physical receiver. So, he's not someone you can just push around at the line of scrimmage. And, with this size, his combination of size and athleticism, I mean, he's going to be a tough matchup for the Pirates. Fortunately, when we've looked through the Pirates roster, they are very strong at the defensive back position. A few different very good defensive backs, multiple guys in their defensive backfield with NFL experience. So that could be a really fun matchup to see, power against power, talent against talent, when the Pirates go up against Green Bay.
And Leverett Ball and I, Oliver Nissi and Leverett Ball, we are breaking down teams in the IFL. Don't you worry, we're going to get to the Pirates and all their players in next week's episode, the roster breakdown episode. That'll be episode 3 in Pirates Weekly. We're just talking about the Green Bay Blizzard. We're going to move on to the next matchup. We'll have that next. The next team up in the IFL Team Showcase is the Spokane Shock. They will be the last team that we're going to talk about in episode 2 and in the IFL Team Showcase special, episodes 1 and 2 in Pirates Weekly. And the Spokane Shock, the Pirates, come back home in Week 13 to take on the Shock. It'll be the 3rd home game in 4-week span for the Pirates. They also go on the road to play the Shock in Week 17, the last week of the regular season. That'll be on the road in Spokane. And Leverett, I want to start this out because it's a homecoming for J.D. Griggs, one of the best Pirates players, arguably their best defensive player. He's made conference first team in the last 3 seasons. He did so in the NAL in 2018 and 19 with the Pirates, but before that, he did it with the Spokane franchise out in Washington.
Yeah, he played for them in 2017. He actually led the league in sacks that year. He was a dominant force defensively, and not much has changed, since he moved over to the Pirates. He's still a disruptive force up front with both quarterback sacks and tackles for loss. Going up against a familiar team, in his former team in Spokane, and we'll see if he can put up the same type of production against them as he put up for them.
And Spokane, so getting back to the Shock, they started as an indoor franchise in 2006. They played in 12 consecutive seasons up until 2017, but haven't played since. They haven't played since the 2017 season. They changed their name that year to the Empire, but they're back as the Shock, and they're back under new ownership.
Yeah, and this is a team that's undergone a lot of change. Like you said, they've flip-flopped the name back and forth from the Spokane Shock to the Spokane Empire and back to the Shock. Also, they've played in multiple leagues. They started out in the AF2, the developmental league for the AFL. Then they moved up to the AFL and now an IFL team. And additionally, you mentioned they've had multiple owners. Their current owner is Sam Adams, 14-year NFL veteran. I actually remember him. I grew up in Baltimore. He was on the Ravens' 2000 Super Bowl team as a defensive lineman. He and Tony Siragusa were quite an intimidating duo up front at the defensive tackle position. So certainly in great hands with Sam Adams. But through all the change that the team has gone through, like I said, with multiple leagues, multiple names, multiple owners, here they are, headed into the 2021 IFL season. As the Spokane Shock under the leadership of Sam Adams, and they're going to be a tough opponent, no question.
And off the air, you're telling me a funny thing about Tony Siragusa. What was it?
Yes. So Tony Siragusa, Sam Adams' partner at the defensive tackle position, he said that he and Sam Adams looked at opposing offensive players as lunch. They're both big guys, but Tony Siragusa especially, his playing weight during the 2000 Super Bowl run was 345 pounds. So, he certainly ate a lot of lunch, and all of the calories and nutrients and proteins really paid off. They pulled in a Super Bowl ring that year.
Yeah, and getting back to the Shock now. So we mentioned Sam Adams. He's bringing the team back to the Washington State. It's the second professional football team in the state of Washington, along with the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL. And Sam Adams, he actually started his NFL career. His first 6 seasons were with the Seahawks. So perhaps bringing in another professional team back to Seattle, that may have been the reason.
Yeah, and that's more common than people think with guys who have, played at the NFL level. When they move back to the indoor game, either as a player, or in this case as an owner, they want to, work with a franchise in which they have local roots. And, he's a guy, like you said, played in Washington for the Seattle Seahawks at the beginning of his NFL career, and now moving back to the area as an IFL owner. We've seen, guys, like I said, who have played briefly in the NFL, then moved over to the IFL as players and have wanted to play for teams with which they have local connections. But, in this case, really trying to put the team on the map. As a team that's had multiple owners and all the change that I talked about, they're looking for stability, and he's a guy who can potentially provide that stability for them.
And Adams, he took over the team in 2019, and one of his first decisions was bringing in a head coach. And the coach that the Spokane Shock selected was a former coach in the Pirates' previous league in the NAL. His name's Billy Back. He coached the Carolina Cobras in 2018 and 2019. In 2018, the Cobras won the NAL championship. And in 2019, the Pirates' second season, the Pirates met the Cobras in a legendary playoff game. That game came down to the final play. So the Pirates, they're going to be really excited, and they're going to really want some revenge going up against a coach that they've seen before.
Absolutely. Like you said, a guy they went up against a lot, including in that epic postseason matchup. And that was, during their NAL days. But, he's not the only guy who they've gone up against, whether it's coaches or players, guys who they went up against in the NAL who have now moved over to the IFL with so many different teams from, NAL teams to former AFL teams all moving over to the IFL. That's... the IFL is looked at by a lot of different people as the next big thing in the world of indoor football. But yeah, they went up against him a lot. He certainly knows what he's doing. He's a great coach, no question. And, at the time, this was before Patrick Pass was the Pirates head coach, although he was involved with the organization then. So, he's not personally trying to avenge a loss on his record as a head coach, as this will be his first season as the Pirates head coach, but still looking to, get some vengeance on the behalf of the entire Pirates organization and, come up with the W this time against a very familiar face.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Pass was there. So he was there for that playoff game, and, now he takes over. He steps in for former coach Peyton. And Patrick Pass is going to lead the way for the Pirates in 2021. Leverett, I want to talk one more thing about the Spokane Shock before we wrap up the IFL Team Showcase, and that is they're the only team that the Pirates are going to play in the Pacific time zone. The Shock all the way out in Washington, and I came across a very interesting stat recently, and that is in the Pirates' first 2 seasons in the NAL, they traveled when they went on road games to and from. They traveled about 19,000 total miles. In 2021, in just the half the amount of road games, they'll be traveling 25,000 miles. So they'll be traveling 5,000 more miles in just one season compared to 2 combined seasons. And I want to just get your take on how that's going to be for some of the Pirates players that have been here the whole time, like Griggs and like the quarterback Sean Brackett and some others.
I mean, it's going to be an adjustment, but that's the price that comes along with being in the best indoor football league in the country and going up against the best competition. You're not just trying to go up against the best competition in your region. You're trying to go up against the best competition nationwide. And so sometimes that means, traveling to, Texas and Arizona and Wisconsin and all over the map. And this is kind of similar also for guys who want to move on to the NFL level. This is what life is like in the NFL. They spend the entire season flying around the country. Some of these NFL players have wives and children, and they don't get to even see them every day because they're constantly traveling and playing against different teams. So it's certainly a grind, but this is what it's like at the highest level of pro football. And it's going to be an adjustment for the Pirates, but I think they can handle it. And, I think for Jawad, when he decided to move the team over to the IFL, he knew there were going to be challenges like that, but he felt strongly that the team could handle it and that it would make them better and stronger as an organization and be better for the development of individual players. So no question they're going to be traveling quite a bit, but it's going to be worth it. They're going to go up against top competition and really see what they're made of.
So the Shock are the last team that we're going to cover in the IFL Team Showcase. The Pirates in weeks 14, 15, 16, and 17, they'll be playing teams that we've already talked about. Teams like the Bismarck Bucks, the Louisville Extreme, the Shock again, the Frisco Fighters again. So the Shock, the last team we're going to talk about, Leverett. This was a lot of fun, but we're not done yet. I want to come back one more segment when we wrap up our thoughts about Episode 2, the 5 teams we talked about tonight. We'll be right back. Back on the IFL Team Showcase for the last segment. We just went around the league, the entire schedule in last week in Episode 1 of Pirates Weekly, and also in this episode this week of Pirates Weekly Episode 2. Leverett, we discussed all the teams, all the 11 teams that the Pirates will be playing this upcoming season. I mean, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, the Pirates, they're going up against some teams who have been around for a while. Whether it's the Sioux Falls Storm with their history in the IFL, or the Green Bay Blizzard, another team that's been in the IFL for a while, or a team like the Arizona Rattlers, a franchise that's been around for a while and had a lot of success, but in a different league, in their case, in the AFL. So, you have some longtime teams they're going up against, also some teams playing their first seasons and teams who are expansion teams. So you have, a mixture of opponents who've been around for a while and some new teams. And for the Pirates, they're not a new team, but they are new to the IFL. So really for them, this coming season is a chance to really make a statement and prove that they can translate some of the success they had in the NAL to the IFL game. And I think it's especially important for them, after having a year off. Their final NAL season was canceled, obviously, due to the pandemic. So after having a year off, entering a new league, it's really important for them to get off to a good start and really make a statement about what type of franchise they can be. And I think with all these new teams in the IFL, there could potentially be a changing of the guard as to who the best team or best teams are. And the Pirates want to prove that they're that team, or at least in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think the Pirates are moving to the IFL at the perfect time. I mean, we've been talking about the IFL. It has stability. It's been around for over a decade now. The Pirates are coming over from the NAL. I mean, the NAL is still around, and the Pirates, they're grateful for their time in the NAL, but they're excited. They're hungry to win their first championship as a franchise and to move into this new league, which has pillars at the top. I mean, you mentioned the Storm, the Rattlers, the Blizzard have been around for a long time. Some of these new teams, like you were referencing, and that we referenced. I mean, the head coaches that are coached by these new teams, the players, some of the free agent signings that we went over in this episode. I mean, it's a very fun league to be a part of. As team insiders, I mean, we can't wait for the season to come around, and we're still in the off season. The season is still a ways away. And we talked a lot. I want to segue just before we wrap up here, Lever. We talked a lot about all the other teams, but next week is going to be the roster breakdown for the Massachusetts Pirates. We're going to be going through all the players that the Pirates have signed up until this point. And Leverett, I want to do a quick little sneak preview. I mean, why don't you take us through some of the players that the Pirates have signed thus far?
Sure. Well, first off, from a roster standpoint, the Pirates have a lot of depth at each position, and there's going to be a lot of competition at each position. There isn't really a big drop off from first string to second string, and that's true at a number of different positions. Also, the Pirates have some guys who are up and coming and could potentially advance to Canada or the NFL, but they also have guys with previous NFL experience who want to continue playing. As far as specific guys, obviously we'll talk about Sean Brackett, returning starting quarterback, won a league MVP in the NAL. We'll talk about guys like J.D. Griggs, who's a defensive force, Thomas Owens at the wide receiver position, and many, many others. And it's really cool. Again, you look around the roster, guys who have, played in the NFL or played on nationally ranked teams that were competing for a national championship each year. I mean, it is a stacked roster, and there could also be more guys added before the start of the season. Really exciting to look at the roster, look at some of the talent they have, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, in the IFL.
Yeah, and like you said, the roster is still building, but next week we're gonna break down the roster as it is right now. It's more than halfway through. More than half of the players that are going to be on the season or on the roster for next season in 2021 have already been signed, and a lot of these players, they come from all around the country. So a lot of these players have really interesting backgrounds. Like you said, they've played in some of them playing the NFL, and some of them have had success formally in the indoor game, like Brackett and Griggs. And it's just, we're excited to get into next week's episode. We're going to get there next week. So, Leverett, we're excited to dive into it next week on episode 3. It'll be a roster breakdown. Pirates Nation, thank you very much for listening. You can find us on our YouTube page at the Massachusetts Pirates YouTube page. Follow us on our socials. Oliver Nissi, Leverett Ball, Team Insiders. We'll see you next week.